It's giving us an error message, so hold tight. Must be, maybe it's going on with some of the craziness.
Could be.
Yeah, let me try one more time. It doesn't want to go live on LinkedIn, so let's go ahead and run it, and then I'll post it after I have it. All right, gang, here we go.
Welcome to Changing the Perception of Blindness, one conversation at a time, where we aim to break down barriers, demystify blindness, and promote real and lasting change. Join host David Steinmetz as he connects us with professionals who are making a positive impact in the community. These leaders help empower individuals who are blind or have other disabilities to live a full and inclusive life. Let's lean in as David kicks off today's conversation.
Hello, and welcome to this episode of Changing the Perception of Blindness, one conversation at a time. I'm really excited for today's show because we're going to be talking about a lot of different things from a different perspective than what we normally talk about and how we get to where we are. And it's funny because it's kind of conversation that Karen and I were having, Karen Nowicki, the producer of this show, we were having this morning about being where you are meant to be at specific times. Coffee's a little slow to kick in this morning. So, we often find ourselves in positions or situations that make us stop and think. And blindness and the experience that people have with blindness is usually, if you're not in it, you don't know it. And when we find out that you are now become part of this, right? Because disability does not discriminate against race, religion, age, gender. It just doesn't care. Disabilities will impact probably everybody listening to this show, whether it's you or somebody you know. And being aware of what's going on around you, not just from the physical space, but from people and experiences, is so important to be able to open our minds and look at situations different than what the lenses we normally look through, right? We get kind of maybe tunnel vision, narrow our thinking when we believe things are one way. And oftentimes that creates barriers to employment for people with disabilities. It creates barriers to inclusion. And, it's a big struggle for myself and my peers that do belong to this community of blindness. And, we work really hard on a daily basis to advocate for ourselves or for each other to ensure that we have equal opportunities. And that goes for, as I mentioned, employment. And oftentimes, individuals, young adults who are blind or have other disabilities don't have the same opportunities to get a job, when you're in that 15, 16 years old and your first job in a fast food place or working for a family member, whatever it may be. In those first few jobs that you have is building your skill sets. Maybe, working, whether it's in a fast food restaurant or landscaping, whatever it may be, right, is, although they might not be an ideal situation, you're learning transferable skills, whether it's communication, it's time management, you're learning how to have interpersonal interactions, and all these things are critical to gainful employment. And for people who are blind, young adults who are blind, we often find that their first career is more when they're in their 20s and are having to come into the workforce without maybe some of those experiences. And to combat that, having people in the community, business owners, mentors, and others who will support and provide the opportunity to someone who is blind that first chance to come into work and start building those skills, and is really critical to really the overall success of that person as a employee and as an individual in society, from gaining independence, moving out of your parents' house, getting an apartment, etc. All these things all play into kind of those building of these skill sets. And so when we talk about changing the perception, it's really about opening up our minds and looking at things a little bit differently. And so I'm really fortunate to have my special guest here today, Barbara Hinsky. And Barbara and I connected early this year, and we had a lot of very interesting conversations around how do we, as a community or as a society, address some really big social issues, which is disability employment. And it's interesting because Barb did not come from um, this industry in terms of disability employment or disability awareness. Um, she is a USA Today and Amazon All-Star author. She's an attorney and novelist. She is focused on writing women's fiction um, and mystery type books. And Barb, I'll let you kind of finish up on terms of your bio and some of the things that you've done, and then we'll get into our conversation.
Thank you, David. And it's just a pleasure and an honor to be with you this morning. So as you said, I'm spent 40 years, almost 40 years as an attorney, and was writing was a novelist during part of that time, and then finally decided that I really could step away from the practice of law and focus on writing, which is what I do full-time now. Women's fiction, mystery thriller, suspense, and sweet Christmas stories have been things I've written. I've had 2 of my works have been adapted for the screen and shown on the Hallmark Channel. The first one was in 2019 called The Christmas Club, and I'm proud to say that it was the most successful movie of 2019 for Hallmark. And then now, last September, they aired Guiding Emily, which they're still airing now and has been the highest rating Hallmark movie of the entire Hallmark time of anything they've had. So I'm very proud of that. And Guiding Emily is a book. Maybe we'll get into that. But the protagonist is a woman who loses her sight in her 20s, and it's a love story, but not a traditional Hallmark love story. It's the story between the story of how she comes together with her guide dog, whose name is Garth. So at the end of the book, I don't think it's a spoiler alert, those 2 get together. And that whole researching that book, maybe we'll talk about that, has led me into this whole area of awareness of disability and the need for inclusion in society, and certainly the need for inclusion in the workforce. And I just want to, before you come back, I do want to say one more thing. You talked about your organization, and you personally, I know, are always advocating for yourself and others. And that is awesome. And everyone needs to know how to advocate for themselves. But it occurs to me, particularly with my legal background, I know how to be an advocate. I did that so many years of my life. And I think sometimes other people need someone else to just pick up the oar and row for them. Sometimes you really can't be your own best self-advocate. Somebody else is like telling people, I really am pretty. If you look at me, you'll see I'm pretty. Well, you can't say stuff like that about yourself. It just doesn't work. So sometimes it's more effective to have somebody else to say, yes, these people are capable, and here's why. Here's what you need to know. So that's kind of what I'm about now.
Well, our show was over. You just said exactly what we need to get the message out to the community, whether it's in the private sector and employers to people in the community serving or supporting, is that it's true. I can't do it alone. Arizona Industries for the Blind cannot do it alone. The Ability One program or the comprehensive service providers cannot do it alone. We definitely need champions that can that see the abilities and the possibilities and find those connections. And part of the conversation I was having at the beginning, right, is your first job is you're creating a network, and it's part of a social group, and that helps you build that network, and that network can support you as you continue to grow, right? And that interaction that you had, and we'll talk a little bit about it in a little bit about blindness, is using those resources in the community and using the people that you have in your network to further that mission. And that's really what I try and do through my work as public relations manager, through this podcast and other commissions and organizations that I'm involved with, is how do we make other people, and I don't want to use the word make, I don't want to force anybody, right? But we have to have conversations that help people see things a little bit differently, open up the lenses, and see those abilities. And I appreciate you saying that, as an attorney, as a novelist, that was not your goal, I don't believe, to be in the position you are in now. Is that correct? I mean, I'm guessing.
Yeah, when I left the practice of law to focus on my writing, I had virtually no idea for this. But I have to say, this new path is my passion project in life, has given me so much joy. I have met so many wonderful people. It is a path that I feel divinely led to be on. And I know everybody doesn't believe in that, and that's fine, but I do. And it's so gratifying. It's enlarging my life.
Oh, fabulous. And the blindness community is grateful for champions like yourself. So let's start at the beginning then, and how you kind of got involved and as your kind of progression into being that champion. You mentioned you wrote the book, Guiding Emily. And where did that idea come from, first of all? And then, what type of research did you do prior to writing the book?
Thank you for asking about that, because I love to talk about it. I had no idea that I was going to write that Guiding Emily series. I think it was February of 2018, I attended a black tie fundraiser for the Desert Foothills Library in Cave Creek, Arizona. It's a privately funded library, wonderful place. And they had always been good to me in my author career. I'd done a number of speaking engagements there. So I was happy to donate naming rights for a character in my next book to the library for their auction item. It was a live auction item. And I attended the gala. And as fate had it, I sat at a table. Across from me was Emily Main and her husband. She was the one who bought the naming rights that night. So Emily Main became a main character. I thought she would be in maybe my Rosemont series, but no, she was in this new series that I didn't even know I was going to write. Next to me was Steve Woblowski and his wife, Melissa. We got talking, during the evening and had a great conversation. Steve, at that time, was the development director at the Foundation for Blind Children in Phoenix. I live a mile from there and had never been in there. I've lived down the street from it, for 40 years. So he said, well, you guys have to come next week and take a tour. And so Brian and I did. And during that tour, I was so moved by everything I saw. And of course, the foundation services not just children, but they like to say their oldest child is 103. They have a huge adult program as well. One incident during that tour really got me. There was a little boy, probably about 4, who raced up to me, threw his arms around me, was giggling so hard I was vibrating, right? Gave him a hug, and he was And Steve said, he was born blind and deaf in Canada. And his parents were told that he would never walk or talk, probably wouldn't live to be double digits. He probably wouldn't make it to 10. And the best that they could do was to keep him comfortable. So these heartbroken parents didn't accept that, did the research, found the foundation, emigrated to the United States, which is not easy to do, to disrupt your life, your economic, whatever. And here he was. I had my arm on his back, and he was very much walking and talking and enjoying life. So at that point, both my husband and I are, choking back tears. And I said to Steve, what do you need? What can I do to help? And he said, okay, we're a nonprofit. We need money. And we need to raise awareness of the isolation that the visually impaired feel within the sighted community. So without thinking, I blurted out, okay, well, I can help with both those things. I would love to be able to write you a check today, but I'm not rich, but I can donate royalties. So half of my royalties from Guiding Emily go to the foundation, and have since day one. And I can write about that inclusion in my book. I'll write a book. And so he didn't look at me like, yeah, right, you're going to do this. He said, okay, well, what can we do to help? And Mark Ashton came up and joined us, and he didn't look at me like I had two heads. He said, okay, what can we do to help? So they gave me White King training. I talked to Wes and all the Matthew, all the assistive technology people, Julie Rock, and the late Julie Rock, who everybody knew her, still misses her. She was a fabulous human being. Julie Oliver, just tons of people helped. They also allowed me to sit in on counseling sessions with the newly blind adults. These people all courageously signed waivers to let me be there. I am still friends with some of those people today. Excuse me. So I got my research for all of that stuff while I was there. That was, I got to it pretty fast. I realized pretty early on, I wanted to be able to market it to my base. Women's fiction readers do not want to read something that's overly hard and heavy. And an adult losing their eyesight, descending into despair and depression, she's newly married, and that goes away, as it does for so many newly blind adults. And in fact, the Hallmark producers didn't like in my first book. They said, the husband was too bad and too unsupportive. He'd never have done that. So Hallmark changed it a little. He still deserts her, but it isn't quite as bad as it was in the book. And I said, no, if you talk to very many newly blind adults, you will find I accurately portrayed that. Anyway, that's all fine. So I realized I was going to be writing a pretty heavy book if I didn't lighten it up. And I thought, okay, well, I'm going to put in a guide dog character. And I take him in the beginning of the book. He's a puppy, and he's going through puppy training. At the end of the book, he graduates, and he gets paired with Emily Main. So I thought, okay, I need to find out about this guide dog stuff. And I did what I always do when I need help. I just ask every single solitary person I meet, hey, do you know anybody who knows anybody who's a guide dog trainer? I was able to network my way to Christy Siefkin, who was at the time the weather person at the local Fox affiliate. She had been a puppy raiser for guide dogs for the blind in San Rafael, and she connected me to them, and they were so gracious and allowed me to come and spend 3 days behind the scenes with them. And they've, beta read my books for guide dog accuracy. And interestingly, I get the most harsh comments on if there's anything that isn't quite right on the guide dog world. I hear about it. Which is really hard, because the convention on the West Coast and the East Coast are not the same in some of the real details. So you're going to hear, and I follow the guide dogs for the blind on the West Coast stuff. So them seeing eye people take me to task on a regular basis. Yeah, and I've learned what to avoid. I don't even want to get
Right? Yeah, you got to be very careful where you step, as they say, right?
Yeah, exactly. So that's a long-winded answer to how that came about. And so let's see, I'm sorry, it was 2019 when I started this. Not 2018, 2019. I attended filming for the Hallmark movie of my Christmas book, The Christmas Club. I attended that in July. And when I got home, I started writing Guiding Emily.
Okay.
And I published it in June of 2020. It did really well. Sold the screen rights in August of 2020. And then it would have been on the screen a little bit earlier if we hadn't had COVID, but we did have COVID. So September of 2023, it aired, which from anybody who works in the movie industry, that is like warp speed.
Mm-hmm.
And has done well.
Great. That is fantastic.
Yeah.
Can I, maybe dig in a little bit deeper to your experience at FBC and as you doing your research, right? You went in not knowing anything about blindness, and the experience changed you. Where in the process did you feel or see the abilities, right? Because oftentimes we have our own preconceived ideas of a blindness or disability or other things, and you touched on some very important things of depression and that adjustment period.
Yeah.
Where did you see in that research and putting this book together the change in maybe in you to see this whole world is not being inclusive for people who are blind?
That awareness dawned right away when I was doing my research, meeting with Julie Rock, meeting with Cynthia Woods, and all just lots of people there in the hallways, because I don't know what percentage of their employees are visually impaired, but maybe half, a lot. And I realized, okay, they're doing everything I'm doing. And I remember one time I was sitting with Matthew, who was one of their IT guys, and I was having trouble with my iPhone. He said, "Oh, yeah, I can fix that." So he had me put it on the accessibility settings, and I hand my phone over, and bing, bang, boom, it's fixed. And I'm like, all right. And Julie Rock, who was a dog trainer, so I had a couple of poorly trained dogs, a dachshund and a labnet, and enrolled them both in her dog training class. Best dog training class. And I've had lots of dogs and have had trainers come to the house. I always give it a shot. I am not a native good trainer, but Julie got me trained.
Yep.
So I learned a lot there in just observing people, including recently, the Foundation for Blind Children was kind enough to do a fundraising evening that they billed as an intimate evening with author Barbara Hinsky. And it was right after the movie aired on Hallmark. So I did some behind the scenes stuff. It was a dinner and a movie thing.
Oh, neat. Okay.
Lots of fun. Invited all my friends, and anybody who was in town came. So from my friends afterwards, there were about 150 people. There was a sold out crowd. I think half the people there were visually impaired, and a good number of them used guide dogs. So I had more than one friend tell me that, you'd never have known that you were in a room full of blind people, except for the canes on the tables and the dogs underneath them. And I'm like, yeah.
Right. What were you expecting, right?
What were you expecting?
The big signal on sign on top of the head. And that's the important part, I think, is and you kind of mentioned it multiple times already in this conversation, right, is that people are able to do the same work that you're doing, right? Whether it's on a computer, cell phone,
Yeah.
sitting at a desk, writing a novel or whatever.
Yeah.
Just because your eyes don't work doesn't mean that your brain doesn't, and you can't be productive. And so many people have that hard time of making those connections. Um, it's really interesting. So you had this fundraiser, and you were talking that your movie was just released. What was that process like? Like going from your book to a movie?
It is such a thrill. My first book that was made into a movie, Hallmark changed it because it was historical and it was kind of more brotherly love, and they made it current day and romantic love, which was fine because I let Hallmark do whatever they want. I'm a no-name author with a first-time movie. I was thrilled to have it. This book, though, when I was contacted by the producers who eventually brought it to Hallmark, I said, okay, we're going to have to talk about this because I don't want its message dumbed down. The message can't be, oh, look at that poor blind girl, or, oh, look at the superwoman blind girl, although there may be a little bit of that in the books only because I shortened up the time period for her to achieve competence because, you have to keep turning pages and all that. And I said, we need to honor this. Absolutely have to honor this. And when I sold my first book, it was a 15-minute conversation, and then we got lawyers involved and did contracts. That was it, which was fine. This time, I probably had 8 or more hours of conversation with these 2 producers. One of them's daughters was a puppy raiser, and she said, you will make me a hero in my own home if you let me do a movie, which is very flattering and nice. But I was so comforted that they wanted to talk to me, and they were on the same page I was. And I'm telling you, when we also went to filming, which filmed last summer in Victoria, so I can't claim any hardship there because who doesn't want to leave Phoenix to go to Canada in the summer? And it was so glorious. But all the way along, our main producer, Beth Grossbard, and the director, Andy Makita, the main actress, Sarah Drew, they were firm in their stance with Hallmark that they weren't going to soften the edges. The scene where she takes her bandages off and learns that she is blind was such a moving moment to be on set. They did it Friday night, last scene of the week, quieted down the set. Every single solitary person on that set was crying during that scene. There were 75 people probably who work on a movie average. Everybody was crying. Sarah Drew was sobbing, and she kept such powerful stuff. Hallmark said, that's way too hard. Our people see that. We kind of like you to redo it. And they all said, no, we're done. We won't. And so they cut around and did some stuff. But I was so pleased that was the vibe and the support. The one thing, and I'm not dissing Hallmark, I love them. They know their audience and they know what they've got to do.
Right.
There's a scene in the first book, where the guide dog puppy is attacked in a restaurant by a phony service dog, somebody with a vest from the internet. That's the one thing that Guide Dogs for the Blind asked me to do. They said, we need you to raise that awareness, because I asked them, what can I do for you other than give you money? And believe me, they don't need money. They've got plenty of money. Anyway, and they were wonderful. They said, yeah, write about this. So I did. And Hallmark said, we absolutely cannot have a dogfight scene in one of our movies.
Wow.
I get that. So they made it a scene in the restaurant where a funny service dog wants to play with the other dog. And okay, well, they made the point that, you need to let service dogs work.
Right.
And you shouldn't be buying phony vests on the internet. And I have become such an aggressive person on that. If I see you can tell when a dog's out in public and is not a trained service dog. So I'll march over and I'll lambaste the people. My husband's like, what are you doing? You're going to get a shot, for heaven's sakes, dial it back. But yeah, I don't dial it back.
Right. Well, I appreciate that passion as a guide dog user. And it definitely makes life very difficult. And I'm glad to hear that you stood your ground in a sense to say this is real life. This is what the experience is
Yeah.
of blindness and losing your vision as a young adult or at any point, right? Is there's this shock, right? Stages of grief and adjustment and rebuilding your life in a sense, oftentimes as a person who's blind. You're still the same person that you were prior to losing your vision. You're just having to find ways to do the things that you want to do. And at each step, that is, a confidence builder to get you back to where you want to be and moving forward, always moving forward in a positive direction. And, things are hard sometimes as living as a person who's blind. But I also know that things are hard for a lot of people that aren't blind. And, it's keeping that mindset in focus where things I can do and not focusing on the things you can't. And for you to be able to put that to paper and then put it to film and keep those beliefs and values in to tell the story, because that's really what's important is telling the story that helps spur the change.
Well, and I think sometimes, a novel is an easier way to express. It's a more palatable way to have people import this knowledge. I get comments all the time. Thank you. I had no idea about this. And now the Guiding Emily series of books is 5 books published from the heart, the 5th book in the series. And so with the continuing story of Emily Main, we've got her dealing with other issues. She's got a great job at a tech company. I sort of patterned her after somebody who I attended a guide dog graduation ceremony when I was at Guide Dogs for the Blind, and there was a man there in his 50s who I think worked at Apple and was getting his guide dog. So I kind of paid attention to that and made her something like that. And her employer is way more supportive and her coworkers than probably would happen in real life.
Right.
But all of my research has led me into 2 big areas of concern. One is the discrimination that visually impaired parents feel. That blew me away. That until 2015 in some states, you could not be awarded sole custody joint custody, sole joint custody of a child in a divorce if you were visually impaired.
Yep.
What?
Yep.
The 2015, my God, that's horrible. And, in doing my research and talking with blind parents, I have 2 kids. They're now in their 30s, so it's been a long time ago. But when my kids were little, my personal friends were the parents of their friends. You just have this whole network you run around with your kids.
Right.
I asked this woman, is that the way it is for you? Because she's got 2 elementary school age kids. And she said, no, not really. Nobody wants me to participate as the homeroom mom. I don't get invited. My kids go to other people's house. People aren't comfortable with their kids coming to my house. And these are not toddlers, for heaven's sakes. These are elementary school kids, which can get in trouble, but nothing that anybody blind or sighted can't keep track of.
Right.
So I was just heartbroken to hear that. And also that within the medical community, you'd expect medical professionals to be very inclusive and aware. You'd be wrong on that. You'd be wrong on that. And that's,
Absolutely. Yep.
yeah, that's outrageous. So there was that. And then I also, as I started getting invited on podcasts and things, learned of the astoundingly horrible unemployment rate within the visually impaired community of those people that want jobs and are capable of having jobs. Because a lot of visually impaired people maybe are in the retirement age, and so they're not looking for a job, they don't want a job. But of those that are, 800,000 nationwide, that's crazy. I'm a person who does visioning and goal setting every year and stuff. So I said, okay, I'm going to, I vision out how many books I'm going to write a year and all that kind of stuff. And this year I added, I want to somehow affect a decrease in unemployment within the visually impaired community of 10%. So that would be, I want to do something that'll help 80,000 people get jobs.
Mm-hmm.
What can I do? No clue. I have no clue. But so I'm talking to people. You and I talked. I am hoping, I'm planning to present panel discussions at areas where cited employers are present, because the government gets it, the industry, the visually impaired community gets it. I mean, cited employers.
Right.
Here in Arizona, we've got Vanguard, State Farm, Nationwide. Yeah, I'm forgetting a bunch, but anyway, there are a lot of regional headquarters here.
Mm-hmm.
They all should be employing visually impaired people. There should be no question about this. So how do we reach them? And I put together a panel. You're going to be one of my panelists. And so we need to find a home to start doing that. I've got feelers out and some people interested, but if there is anybody listening, here's a panel. We'll have some visually impaired people who are doing jobs that are prevalent within the sighted community, someone whose work as a visually impaired person will blow them away. In Arizona, I've got a phlebotomist in that, because I want to do a little shock and awe for the sighted community. I want them to rock back there and chair and say, what? And then a couple of employers who do employ visually impaired people say, oh yeah, it's not a big deal.
Yep.
It's all fine. And then the last person would be someone who can speak to on a broad level, the assistive technology that's out there, tax credits, and spoiler alert, the cost to accommodate a visually impaired worker, not once a month or once a year, but forever, just one-time cost is $500.
Yeah.
That's nothing.
So you get it. I get it. Arizona Institute for the Blind gets it.
Yeah.
Why do you feel that employers, large corporations, don't get it?
I feel they don't get it because they're not employing.
Well, absolutely, they're not employing. What's the barrier from?
I have to believe it's lack of knowledge, because people are kind and people are not wanting to discriminate. And, I think it is essential for large employers for a number of reasons. Number one, the talent base. Talents are evenly distributed, in my view, throughout everyone in society. So the minute you take out one group of society, whether it is based upon race, ethnicity, gender, whatever kind of disability, hearing, sight disability, then you are automatically taking out of your worker pool, your talent pool, a whole bunch of people who have talents that you need. You've now limited yourself. Hiring visually impaired people will also help you with retention. That's a big issue for employers. And in my research, visually impaired people who find good jobs stay in those good jobs. Mm-hmm. Not bouncing all over the place. And finally, employers are always yammering on about wanting people who can think outside the box and problem solve. Well, every visually impaired person I have met basically has a PhD in problem solving. That's what you do all day long.
Absolutely.
So, and that's not a light thing to say, because it is a muscle that, sort of like a muscle, it's a habit that you develop.
Mhm.
And it is something that is finely honed. So those are all the reasons why I think we need to bring this to the forefront. And like I said, I felt like I was divinely guided to write Guiding Emily, and how quickly it went to the film. And it's been such a successful series, and I'm going to keep writing more. So I think this is a logical extension of my work in that. I'm certainly no expert, but I can be a catalyst.
Sure.
And I can knock on doors. So anybody listening,
We'll put them in contact with you
yeah, please.
for sure. It's great, and you can hear the passion in your voice, and you have seen it firsthand. The experiences, firsthand through your interaction with Foundation for Blind Children, Guide Dogs for the Blind, and other individuals you connected in the blindness community, that anything is possible when you're given that chance or the opportunity. And I was talking at the top of the hour about networking and the first job, and right in um, growing your skill sets from interpersonal communications to customer service problem solving. And you think about all these things that come forward out of those opportunities. And for a lot of people who are blind, they become vision impaired later in life,
Yeah.
whether it's a traumatic brain injury or disease or some other factor that causes that vision loss. And as I said before, it doesn't change those skill sets that you had prior don't go away. So it's coming back and using the skill sets that you've learned as a blind person, and you combine those two things together, and you do bring probably better skill sets to the workforce, right? You're more dedicated, as you mentioned, you're loyal. Um, Study after study says that it's good for business if you think of from the dollars and cents things in terms of increased revenue, increased profit, increased level of culture in an organization. You become more diverse, and then that also opens up to new markets, etc.
Yeah.
So it's a win-win situation. But when we talk about a lot of times diversity, equity, and inclusion, the D isn't disabilities. We're not part of that diversity group. I see it not just from the hiring perspective. I go and I'm looking at a corporation's supplier diversity program. You don't see an organization, a nonprofit organization, an organization that supports people who are with a disability. We need to make sure that these organizations see the value of partnering with people who are blind, bringing people who are blind into the workforce. And one is great, two is better, and so on. And, we'll get to your 10% and make an impact in the lives of people who are blind. And, um, here in Arizona, we estimate that there's probably about 25,000 people here in Arizona working age that
Mhm.
want to work that aren't working. They've given up either from the fact that, there's too many barriers, whether it's digital accessibility, or transportation, and the reason for the show, my belief is this perception that someone who's blind can't work, and they're just not given that opportunity. So working with you, Barb, in terms of how we get there, right? So we're talking about connecting with large corporations, small business that um, can be open-minded to listen to a presentation that allows them the opportunity to learn something new, and right, and we're talking about opening up our lenses. opening up our peripheral vision to see beyond what we see, um, which are all important things. So how are we going to do that? We're checking with large corporations and HR groups and things like that, right? Where else would your panel be a good fit?
Well, chambers of commerce, just about anywhere that someone wants. Uh, and at this point, we're getting started. So I am happy to get started wherever we can make a start. This will be a program, this will be a panel where people will leave feeling energized. When they walk out, they will be on their phones talking to the person next to them, whatever, saying, God, did you just hear what we heard? That is so interesting. And it will be water cooler conversation and dinner time conversation. That's how these things start. You just get a movement started, because then people will take it. That's what these panels will do. They will be so energizing, because my belief is that people are kind at heart.
Mm-hmm.
And it isn't a kindness to give someone an opportunity that they should have, but it is unkind to not give them.
Mm-hmm.
So I think people will naturally gravitate to this, but also because it fills their need for talented work for talented employees, which are hard to find right now, and retention is a big issue. So those are nuts and bolts, dollars and cents issues that we can solve today.
Mm-hmm.
But you can also have the feeling of, I'm doing something good in the world. We're advancing society.
Mm-hmm.
By inclusion. No one I ever talked to said, I really just want to grow up and live on Social Security disability. That's kind of my goal in life. Nobody. When I think about my own life, jobs have been key to my well-being and my inclusion, and you find your tribe at work and friends, and sometimes yes, sometimes no. But almost all of us have some work friend that's been really key to us in our life.
Yep.
And it just is awful to take that away from people. And now that I've done presentations and podcasts and interviews with so many, American Council for the Blind, National Federation of the Blind, all kinds of organizations, and I may be the only sighted person in the room, and they're running everything, and it's all fine, and it's just all seamless. So there's absolutely no reason why we are not doing a better job. The only reason has to be lack of awareness.
Absolutely. And it takes one conversation at a time, what we're doing here today. And I'll add to that oftentimes that wow factor of, oh my gosh, I had no idea, comes from the interaction, right? Is meeting someone who's blind, whether it's on the street or in a business environment or on this panel. But also, I find when people, organizations that I connect with and are building relationships with, is I'll bring them into our organization and we'll tour, and not just the shop floor, or the warehouse, but we tour all areas of the organization to say, you know what, someone who's blind can be an accounts payable clerk. This is the tools that they have to be successful. Someone who is blind or low vision can be, an HR admin assistant or a public relations manager or a CEO, right? It's the person I'm talking to sitting across from the table who is limited in their vision, not me as a person who is blind. And it's how we have these conversations every day, and we work to bring that awareness. Is we're doing it. We're living our lives just like you live your life. We want the same things to be successful. We want to support our families. We want to be independent. Whatever that version of your dream of of success looks like to you as an individual is the same for someone who is blind, vision impaired, or have other disabilities.
Mhm.
And I just love your passion to say we need the rest of the world to hear it and see it. So I'm very grateful for the work that you're doing as, this start of you transitioning from having that first experience going into FBC to where you are now, and continue to grow that passion and drive to say we need to make change. You didn't have a direct connection to it. You didn't say, well, I'm worried about my child who's blind, so I have to create
Yeah.
something, right? You came from a different pathway, but you're end up in the same area. And I'm just very appreciative of you and the work that you're doing.
I'm hoping that I'm that neutral person without my own self-interest
Mm-hmm.
pursuing this, and that will help me open doors. And I'm a believer in the magic of putting stuff out in the universe. So I feel pretty certain somebody's gonna hear this today and be in touch, and I'll get you, and we'll be getting our panel out there, and we'll be affecting some change in that.
Absolutely. And, I know you're going to be our keynote speaker at the Vision Rehabilitation and Technology Expo in November, talking about inspiring as individuals who are blind, that kind of voice, using your voice, and kind of creating that positive image, right? Because a lot of times our self-worth takes a big major punch in the gut because these barriers that maybe others are putting upon us. And so I know you'll be there for that. How else would somebody who's listening today be able to get in contact with you?
So thank you for asking. And yes, I'm excited about the V-rate thing as well. And I'm thinking about interviewing, and the times it is so hard for anybody to interview for a job because you're so emotionally wrought when you go into an interview. Mm-hmm. And then if you keep getting told no, that would be such a horrible, for stupid reasons too. That's a whole nother show. All the people who told me.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It's just, anyway. So to find me, probably the most direct way would be my email, which is the letter B, Hinske, HINSKE @gmail.com. I have a website, www.barbarahinske.com. Of course, all my books, if anybody wants to check them out, they're on Amazon and Walmart and Target and Barnes and wherever you buy books. I've made my presence known. But I think probably and I'm on Facebook too as B. Hinske, and I've got a big Facebook presence. I was lucky enough. That's a whole nother story of how I grew to be such a big Facebook presence, but I've got a big killer presence. So I'm on B. Hinske on Facebook. So that's where you can find me.
Well, we're just about out of our time here. It's gone really fast. Yeah. It seems like we just start digging in, and the next thing I know, we're pushing the envelope here. I want to thank you again. I want to reinforce the fact that through these conversations, that we are making a difference for people who are blind. We are making a difference for businesses and making those connections. And it continues to prove as you have today, and reinforce that with the right training, the right technology, and the right attitude, people who are blind are successful in the workplace. So thank you.
I'm thrilled to have been with you. Whenever we talk, we just ramble on forever. So I look forward to the next time we chat, and thank you so much for having me here.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Changing the Perception of Blindness, one conversation at a time, with your host, David Steinmetz. Be sure to subscribe to Changing the Perception of Blindness, one conversation at a time, on your favorite podcast platform, and tune in live on Phoenix Business Radio X every third Friday at 9 a.m. We hope you feel inspired by today's conversation, and maybe we've even sparked a new idea or opportunity.